What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing, and we are coming off of the first win of the season against the Detroit Lions. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still on a high from Sunday. But we have another game to get to already here on Thursday night against the Commanders. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about the news. The Packers have extended Christian Watson for another season, so he will be a Packer through the end of next season. Definitely unexpected. If you guys follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I posted about it. I was like, that was very unexpected. Biggest reason being, we have a lot of other players to extend. The receiver market has exploded in recent years. We just saw Jameson Williams get paid about $25 million a year. We saw Khalil Shakir get paid $20 million last season. These are both receivers from Christian Watson's draft that have already been extended for a ton of money. So I assumed, the Packers would probably wait to see what he did this season first, but they must feel really, really good about his recovery. So they were able to extend him for a 1-year, $13 million deal. The guarantee is only $6 million. It's all in signing bonus, which is interesting. So it gives him some flexibility. Ultimately, it's good for Christian because now he can, kind of come back when he's ready. I do think he's going to be back after the bye. I really do. I think he's going to be back much sooner than people are saying. That being said, he doesn't have to come back now. He doesn't have to feel like he needs to overproduce this season and everything like that. Now, when we look at the receivers in his class, Christian Watson's outproduced Jameson Williams, who just got his extension for the Lions. Jameson Williams, guys, he was basically paid for one season last year. He had his breakout season last year. His career receiving yards are only 1,300. He had 1,000 of them last season. So he's kind of been injury riddled. He had the suspension, right? So, again, you see these other contracts come out and you're like, there's no way the Packers are going to pay that for X person, right? So I was pretty shocked by it, but ultimately it's a really, really, really good move for the Packers. I know on the last episode, I answered a question about Romeo Doubs getting an extension. I think this probably makes it a little bit more unlikely now. But I do still think it's possible. He just has to ball out. Christian Watson, the impact he's proven to have when he's on the field, there are remarkable improvements in productivity going all the way back to his rookie season. The only thing where I would say it sort of counteracts that is that stretch in 2023 when the Packers were winning all those games. They actually didn't have Christian for a good chunk of that. But then in the playoffs last year, you saw when they don't have that vertical threat that he brings, it really kind of just shuts down the field, at least that deep part. All off season we were talking about, they need to get a deep threat receiver. And then they drafted Matthew Golden and everybody's like, well, there's their deep threat. But if you guys kind of know Matthew Golden's game, that's not really what he's best at. So I think that this gives him a really, really good receiver room next season. And depending on how quickly he can get back to being himself this season, their wide receiver room, in my opinion, was already the deepest in the NFL. But you add Christian Watson to that mix, the amount of speed that they can put on the field when they have, let's say, Luke Musgrave, Marshawn Lloyd, Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, guys, the amount of things they can do on the field there is not a single secondary in the entire NFL who can keep up with those guys. I think they could run a ton of different packages. I think they could have a ton of fun with it. We're going to see it this year. We are going to see it this year, and I'm super excited about it. All right. Let's talk about the Commanders. So I'm not going to get quite as deep on this podcast as I did for the Lions one. For one, obviously it was a short week. I didn't have as much time to prep for this, but two, I, don't know that much about the Commanders other than the, offense. So I had to do as deep dive as I could. Obviously, I wish I could do the podcast full time, but I do have another job. So I was able to kind of figure out how the Packers can win this game. But, again, there's not a lot of turnaround time. So I did my best, guys. But that just means we got 10 more days after this where I can prep for the Browns game. And we'll review this one probably on the weekend. So there's that. The Commanders, they beat the New York Giants in week 1. They won 21-6. And I didn't record that NFL Bold Predictions podcast that I'd mentioned before. But one of them was, I think the Giants are going to be better than the Commanders this season. Well, as high as I still am on their defensive line, and I actually have a lot of confidence in the Giants in general. I really think they can be good. They're not going to be good with Russell Wilson back there. He looked absolutely horrendous last week. If there's any Russell Wilson stans that listen to this, I apologize for saying this, but Russell Wilson has been one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the NFL for a while. I thought his best season was in 2019. That playoff game, the Seahawks versus the Packers, was one of the best games of quarterbacking I've seen from a quarterback in crunch time that Russell Wilson played that year, but really hasn't done much since. I don't know why the Giants aren't starting Jackson Dart. I know they're trying to protect him. They did not have their left tackle last week, Andrew Thomas, which we'll get into in a minute. And I think Evan Neal was out too. I don't think he's very good, but regardless. So maybe they want to protect Jackson Dart. They don't want to get him killed back there. But I do think the Giants are actually a pretty good team. And their pass rush is one of the best in the NFL. So looking at the stats from that game, the Commanders had 432 total yards against the Giants. They had 220 rushing yards, which is crazy. They had 6.6 yards per play, which was outstanding, 25 first downs. Their third down efficiency was only 4 out of 11, so it was about 30%. Not too good, to be honest, but I guess it's better than 30%. It's about 35%, whatever. They running for 220 yards, I think, was much more about the defense of the Giants versus the fortitude of the Commanders' offense. We'll just say that. So the Commanders' defense held the Giants to 231 yards. The Giants only had 74 rushing yards. They only averaged 3.7 yards per play. So, again, when you look at these stats, there was one that really jumped out too. In addition to that, the Commanders had 12 penalties for 89 yards, which is crazy. And the Giants, their time of possession was 30 minutes. The Commanders was 29 minutes and 28 seconds. So, again, the time of possession was pretty close, but when you look at the score, the final score was 21-6 Commanders. It would seem like they would have more of that, more time with the ball. That being said, guys, let's talk about the Commanders a little bit. The penalties are pretty striking because they are one of the oldest teams in the NFL. I think they might be the oldest team in the NFL. They have a really young secondary, which we'll get into. But they got a lot of older vets on the team, Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner at linebacker, which we'll talk about in a minute. For them to be the highest, have that many penalties, that was pretty surprising. I need to call it the elephant in the room after going over those numbers, right? I mentioned it a bit earlier, right? Russell Wilson's not a starting quarterback in this league anymore. And again, if I know he went to Wisconsin, there's a lot of Badger fans who still love Russ Wilson. I've never been a Russell fan personally. I'll never forget that Seahawks-Packers game back in 2012 when he pretended like they won that game when they didn't. Whatever. Anyway, this is one of the worst quarterback games I've seen and I saw in week 1. The Giants have Malik Neighbors, who I think can be the best receiver in the league at some point. In fact, I think that if he gets a quarterback who can throw to him, it could be this season. That's how much I like him. Darius Slayton, he's a deep threat guy. I like Wan'Dale Robinson as well. But Russell Wilson's average depth per target, despite having those guys, was under 5 yards. So basically, Russell Wilson was just dumping the ball off the entire game. And again, part of it, the Commanders did dominate up front, and mostly because the Giants have a terrible offensive line, especially without their left tackle. Okay, let's get into the keys on offense. So key number 1 for the Packers on offense, use motion and play action when you throw the ball. So the last time Matt LaFleur faced Dan Quinn's defense, it was the best day of my life, aka the day the Packers killed the Cowboys in the 2023 playoffs. That was, in my opinion, the best game Matt LaFleur has ever called in this league. He dominated that game. He was, I would say, 3 steps ahead of Dan Quinn at all times, right? The game against the Cowboys that season, in that playoff game, the Packers play action them to death. They used a ton of motion. And what they did, and what I expect them to do in this game, is they're going to run plays that look like another play, and they're just going to build another play off of it. So, in other words, they might run a play that the Commanders scouted, where they send Matthew Golden in motion and he stops in the backfield. In this game, they might run that same play, but make it a double move where he stops in the backfield and then he turns it up for a wheel route or whatever. You guys get the point. Matt LaFleur is a very, very good play caller. He's very creative. So we have to expect that he's going to be pretty damn creative in this game again. He has, anytime that the Packers have, under Matt LaFleur, have played a Dan Quinn defense, they've scored 31 points a game. So I think that he knows how to attack this guy, and I think he will in this one too. Okay, so I think this game we're going to see Matthew Golden move around a little bit. I think they're going to try to use his speed against one of these linebackers and or their safeties. This is not a fast team. We'll just say that. I think they're going to try to get their wide receivers and their tight ends matched up on their linebackers. Again, they have Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. Both of them are good run-stopping linebackers. We'll get into the PFF grades in a minute. Bobby Wagner, he's on the wrong side of 30. He did have a good season last year. Louvu and Wagner both did well against the run last week, but they did really, really poorly in coverage. So Bobby Wagner had a 65 coverage grade. And guys, remember when I go into PFF grades, 60 is average. So anything below 60 is really bad, and anything above 70 is pretty good. So Bobby Wagner, solid. He had a 65 coverage grade. Louvu had a 49 coverage grade. So needless to say, you can attack these linebackers in the air, and I do think they're going to try to do that. The Commanders have Trey Amos at cornerback, and you guys know I really liked Trey Amos coming out of the draft. I did some scouting reports on him. I watched a ton of games on him. Good player, but he's still a rookie, and he had a bad game last week. I think you can take advantage of these corners. I think we're going to see some double moves from the receivers where they, try to confuse the defensive backs. They're going to do a lot of motion, like I said, to try to get them isolated on a linebacker / safety. But if you do go one-on-one against these corners, I think they can be taken advantage of. Again, the more motion that they use, the more the defense has to process and decide what to do. Make them second-guess themselves. Give them a look on one play, build on it with a different play, like I said earlier, right? Things like that add confusion to that side of the ball. And again, if you have a young secondary like they do and what I would say a slow secondary, it's going to really put them in a bad spot, right? I would say their feet are going to be in mud. That's a better way to put it, because they don't really know what's coming next. Aside from Trey Amos, they have Marshawn Lattimore at corner, who they acquired via trade last year from the Saints. I think he's always been a little overrated personally. There was a year where his Madden score or his Madden overall was like 93. I'm like, that has never been the guy I've seen. He had a 64 grade in week 1. They have Mike Sanderstill, who is a cornerback from Michigan. He was a rookie last season. He is also very slow. There were some people, including myself, that thought the Packers might be interested in him in the draft because he's kind of taller and longer. Not fast, though. Poor athlete. He had a 62 coverage grade last week. Trey Amos, again, liked him coming out. He's still a rookie. He had a 57 coverage grade last week. So despite the Giants having a really, what I would call average receiver room outside of Malik Neighbors, I do think that they still didn't grade well. So we'll put it that way. I think you can take advantage and win in one-on-ones against the corners, right? I don't think their safeties are much better either. Will Harris and Quan Martin are their safeties. Now, Will Harris did have a strong game in week 1. His PFF grade was 84, and he did have an 82 coverage grade, which is good, right? Quan Martin had a 58 overall grade and a 52 coverage grade. So again, I think you can take advantage of this secondary. I really do. I think the Packers are going to try to run the ball early, probably do some stuff where they can go lateral, right? Maybe some toss plays, maybe some reverses, right? Some of those motions that go in, hand it to one of the receivers, right? If you get laterally, the Packers are significantly faster. They have really athletic offensive linemen, and you can take advantage of their slow linebackers in that way. So I don't think running up the middle every play is the right way to go on this defense. Try to spread it out, make them run you down, make you go side to side. I think that they can win in that way. So that's key number 1. Key number 2, protect Jordan Love. So the Commanders, they pressured the Giants 19 times last week. So for perspective, we know how dominant the Packers were in week 1 against the Giants. They also had 19 pressures against the Lions. So again, you have to be cognizant of that. When you look at this is an interesting thing. So if you guys look at defensive success rate and EPA per play, right? These are, Cody Alexander does this for, I don't remember the website. I think it's Football Outsiders. Very much matches your eyes when you look at the EPA per play. It basically just determines how efficient the team is on both sides of the ball. The Commanders were only 17th last week. So in week 1, 17th, not very good. So again, it kind of shows you more. The Giants scoring 6 points was less about the Commanders being good on defense and just more how bad the Giants were, right? When I looked at the grades, though, and even the tape, like I said, I think that the Giants, they were really bad in pass protection. That gave the Commanders, a pretty a pretty strong showing when it comes to their pass rush. But when you look at the grades on it, none of the Commanders' defensive linemen had over a 70 pass rush grade. So Doris Armstrong, who, by the way, I'd never even heard of until last week, he actually had 8 pressures in that game, and he graded out at a 72. So, again, it's like, so you had 9 pressures, 8 pressures, whatever it was, but you only graded it as 72. That's strange, right? They do have some meat inside, Daron Payne and Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw was a former first-round pick by the 49ers. Daron Payne's been on the Commanders for a while. Payne has some juice on the inside from a pass rushing standpoint. Javon Kinlaw had a really good week 1. I do like those two, but again, I don't think that you don't have to game plan around those guys. They're not a Micah Parsons. They're not a, Aaron Donald or Dexter Lawrence or whatever, right? On the other side, they have Dietrich Wise Jr. I don't really know much about him. He didn't grade very well last week either. So in summary, guys, I really am not too concerned about the Commanders' pass rush. If they're human, they can be pushed around. That leads us to the next point, right? Zach Tom and Aaron Banks, so the right tackle and the left guard for the Packers, are dealing with injuries. We found out that LaFleur did say neither injury is long-term, and he said we're going to give them up till game time to see if they're ready to play, which, he says it all the time. So if I had to guess, though, they'll probably proceed with caution. They'll probably play Jordan Morgan at left guard, and then they're going to play Darian Kennard at right tackle, who I thought played really well in week 1 as well. And Jordan Morgan had a really good grade in week 1 as well. So if the Packers were healthy, meaning they had Zach Tom and Aaron Banks, I'd have zero concern with this pass rush. But considering they're not, and you never know what you're going to get with, again, Darian Kennard's only been in the building for like 2 weeks. I feel good about Jordan Morgan, but in the last game, he was rotating with Sean Ryan, which I think helped shore up the protection a little bit. There's not going to be a rotation this week. So I do wonder a little bit. Their depth is going to get pushed a little bit in here. If there's another injury in the front, like it could get ugly. So I do think, again, they have to make sure that they protect Jordan. I do think, though, the key, I think they're going to protect him, and he's going to have plenty of time to throw. If this happens the way I expect it to, I think they're going to eat against the Commanders. The weakest unit in this entire game is the Commanders' defense against the Packers' offense. We'll get to the keys in a minute on defense. The Commanders have a really, really good offense. We'll get there. But if you can give Jordan the same amount of time or even a bit less, like that was how good they were, even if they weren't as good as they were last week against the Lions. I think if Jordan has that much time to throw, he's going to dice them up. So again, if you have Jordan Love in fantasy this week, this is when I would start him. I wasn't able to draft him in my league, and it's still eating me alive because I think he's going to have a crazy season. I mentioned on a previous episode too, guys, the depth the Packers have at receiver allows them to, spread out, get one-on-ones with really poor corners or, again, matchups against safeties, right? The Commanders have a cornerback by the name of Noah Igbenogany. And yes, that's a real name. They drafted, actually, he was a Dolphins first-round pick a few years back. I actually liked him coming out of the draft. He's their next corner in line behind the 3 guys we talked about, Amos, Lattimore, and Sanderson. He had a 42 grade from PFF last week. So if I'm the Packers, I'm going to try to get any of my receivers on that guy. And, think about a one-on-one with Matthew Golden or Dontavian Wicks. Good night. He's going to beat them. They're going to beat them, or they're going to beat him easily. So again, as productive as the passing game was against the Lions, this secondary for the Commanders isn't even the same stratosphere. So I expect they're going to commit to run the ball early. The Commanders are probably going to come in with a game plan to stop the run, and they were able to do that against the Giants. They probably feel pretty good about that against the Packers. So just keep pounding it, attack the edges, use play action. That should be the game plan this entire year. I do think we're going to see a big game from Jordan. I think he could even go over 300 yards passing in this game, which he's only done a few times, which is kind of weird. As long as they protect him, and again, you got to be careful on this against this defense because they are, Dan Quinn's a great schemer, right? He could scheme up some blitzes. But again, none of these pass rushers scare me. So I do think those are the 2 keys in offense. Bigger concern is the keys on defense. Key number 1, don't let Jaden Daniels beat you with his legs. Last season, Jaden Daniels, he was second in the NFL in rushing yards, only to Lamar Jackson. So the dude can run. And he ran in college, and he's really, really smart in the NFL. He doesn't do anything stupid with it. He's smart. Again, I thought the Giants did a pretty good job of containing him last week. He didn't beat him for any big plays. He did have quite a few good carries, though. You know, when you have a pass rush like the Giants and like the Packers, right, the key is to take advantage of the aggression and the impatience, we'll say, or aggression on whatever word you want to use on the edges, right? Rashawn Gary's always been a little bit susceptible to the zone read. So again, if he does that in this game, if Jaden Daniels can do that, I do think that Rashawn Gary can be taken advantage of. So again, fake the handoff to the running back. If the defensive end crashes in, gets too aggressive, the quarterback will keep it. We need to watch that in this game. I think Micah Parsons is also pretty aggressive in those situations, but I think Micah Parsons can run down Jaden Daniels. Rashawn Gary can't, despite how much I love Rashawn. So again, in this game, they can't let Jaden Daniels pull a Colin Kaepernick. The 2012 playoff game, all you Packer fans know how traumatizing that was. Up until last season, especially under Joe Barry and under Mike Pettin, running quarterbacks have always given the Packers a lot of hell. We saw last year, Anthony Richardson can run. Jalen Hurts can run. I believe there was another quarterback they played last year who could run. They never really let any quarterbacks beat them on the ground last season. So we really just want to make sure that happens again in this game. So don't get your backs turned in coverage. If there has to be somebody watching Jaden Daniels at all times. The Packers have linebackers who can catch him, though. So that's the difference between the Packers. They have speed that a lot of other teams don't, especially the Giants. Speed's not their forte. Power is their forte. So, again, when you look at what the Packers can do to stop Jaden Daniels in the running game, Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, as long as they have somebody watching Jaden Daniels, either of them guys, they can catch him. I'm not too concerned about that. So, again, don't let Jaden Daniels beat you with his legs. That's key number one. Key number two, get pressure on Jaden Daniels. So, again, the Lions' interior offensive line, they were not good last week. But I don't think it's been talked about enough how well Rashawn Gary did and Micah Parsons did against the tackles against the Lions, right? Even after the game, all I've heard is, yeah, the Lions have a brand new interior and, they were bad last week, and it's true, right? But ultimately, that wasn't the only way the Packers won last week. They also won by, again, they were very good against the tackles. You saw Penei Sewell get dominated a few times by Micah Parsons. That's a really, really tough matchup. And Micah Parsons, on basically 70% of himself, was able to beat him. In this game, the Packers it'll be Micah Parsons versus the rookie, Josh Connerly. So Brian Burns, if you watched the game last week against the Giants, the Commanders and Giants, Brian Burns had a really good game last week. As good as Brian Burns is, he's not Micah Parsons. So if you can get Micah Parsons on Josh Connerly, this could get ugly quick. Micah on a rookie, that's a massive mismatch. You can expect the Commanders, they're going to slide help over there. That's going to leave Devontae Wyatt and Colby Wooden as the other pass rushers inside, one-on-one. So I like that matchup a lot. Their interior, Tyler Biadasz, Nick Allegretti, and Brandon Coleman. Biadasz had a really bad game last week. He had a 47 grade from PFF. Brandon Coleman, though, he had a 20 PFF grade in pass blocking. 20. So again, guys, the average, an average game is a 60. He had a 20. So I don't care who it is. If you put Lucas Van Ness in there, you put Devontae Wyatt, put Carl Brooks in there, they're going to win that matchup. Now, Nick Allegretti played really, really well. He graded out at 84. Excuse me. Part of that is because the Giants have Dexter Lawrence on the interior, right? Dexter Lawrence is the best defensive tackle in the game since Aaron Donald retired, in my opinion. He didn't actually play that well last week. Again, he did, but it wasn't like a crazy Dexter Lawrence game. And I think Nick Allegretti had a lot to say about that, and that helped with his grade being good. But guys, the cheetah package, you guys are going to hear this all year. The cheetah package is where they have LVN, Rashawn Gary, and Micah Parsons on the field at the same time. This package in this game, even if they do it 20 times, is going to scare the hell out of Jaden Daniels, and it should, right? Last season, Micah Parsons, he sacked Jaden Daniels 4.5 times. So 4.5 sacks in 2024. That's crazy. So we all know from what we saw on Sunday, I think Micah Parsons can contain him. He's probably the only edge in the NFL who can actually run with Jaden Daniels. They ran the same 40 time in college, by the way. Now, obviously, Micah Parsons has put on some weight since then, but he's still fast. right? So get pressure on Jaden Daniels. Make him make decisions fast. Jaden is really, he's, in my opinion, Jaden Daniels can be the best quarterback in the NFL. That's how good he is. LOL that the Bears didn't draft him, by the way. And one of the reasons I like him so much is that he's got a very similar demeanor to Jordan Love. Just nothing phases him. So if you get pressure on him, he's not going to get fazed by it, right? But he is a bit of a gunslinger. He'll take chances in the air. He has many times. He's gotten away. Last year, his turnover play percentage, like his turnover-worthy play percentage, was actually really high in comparison to the amount of picks he actually threw. So he'll throw you a few is what I'm trying to say. So I do think that, again, you get some pressure on him, make him make fast decisions, make him, uncomfortable in the pocket, get pressure up middle. I really think that they can do that on Sunday or tonight. Geesh, can't talk today, guys. I'm recording this podcast in the morning on Thursday, and I just had my coffee, so I'm like, whew, hopefully I'm not tanking this too bad for you guys. Key number 3, hold up in coverage on the back end. In my opinion, the strength of the Commanders is their passing game. Now, granted, they ran the ball really well last week, but putting the ball in Jaden Daniels' hands, having him throw to Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, even Noah Brown, Zach Ertz at tight end, this is a really formidable passing attack. Is it better than the Lions last week? I think the Lions have better skill players, but Jaden Daniels is a much better quarterback than Jared Goff, so they have a challenge this week. Nate Hobbs is questionable for the game. I do think that he really needs to play in this game. If I had to guess, they probably are going to sit him until next weekend, give him 10 days off, right? But I do think that they need Nate Hobbs in this one. They can't. I think if they get that passing game going where they're hitting Terry McLaurin deep, they got Deebo Samuel in the middle and in the kind of the trick play area, I don't like our chances in that against the Commanders offense. Again, it helps. The Packers have one of the best safety duos in the league, Evan Williams, Xavier McKinney. I do think they're going to be able to help the corners out and not leave him on an island in this game. Terry McLaurin didn't grade very well in week 1. You got to remember, he didn't even really have training camp. He's kind of being worked in slowly, which should it play out well for the Packers. I do think that's going to help the Packers this week, that he's still ramping up. But Deebo had a pretty good game last week. And guys, I kind of make fun of Deebo for, I think he's really overrated. I know there's a lot of people who love him. And, when the Commanders acquired him, you saw like Dan Orlovsky and others who I really respect, by the way. They're being analysts, right? But there were a lot of people really hyped about the Commanders doing that. Everyone's talking about how he's in such great shape. I still don't see it from him. He still looks a little pudgy. Sorry, that's mean, but I don't really see that from him. He still looks slow to me. I don't think he's like this big game wrecker that a lot of people think that he is. Now, granted, he's trying to get a new contract. He's motivated. He definitely looks better than last season, but I don't see him single-handedly wrecking shop in this game. He's never really played that well against the Packers, so then that leaves their tight ends. Again, Noah Brown, I'm not too worried about him. So you stop McLaurin, make Deebo beat you. You're going to be doing pretty well in this one. Tight end, like I said, they have Zach Ertz. He, I think, is over 30 years old. He's playing pretty well still. He didn't really play that great in week 1. Ironically, John Bates, who I've never even heard of, their second tight end, played better. Ultimately, again, when we're talking about the Commanders' offense, don't let Terry McLaurin beat you. And don't let Jaden Daniels beat you with his legs. If you can stop those two things, even if they try to win by running the ball, the Packers are going to win this one because they're not going to be able to run the ball when they're down 14-0, which is what I think is going to happen, or 10-0. So if Zach Ertz, Deebo, they beat you, tip your cap, right? Say, okay, you guys had a good game. Don't let Terry beat you. If Terry goes over 100 yards in this game and a couple touchdowns, that makes me a little bit nervous. So again, I think McKinney and Williams, they're going to have to eliminate all the deep passing, which they have, by the way. Terry can kill you deep, and he has many, many times in his career. So again, make sure that Terry McLaurin doesn't beat you and, hold up in coverage overall. That's key number 3. Key number 4, don't sleep on the running game. So again, this is not the rushing attack that the Lions have, but they do have Austin Eckler. Their rookie, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I liked him coming out. I watched a whole game of his. I think it was against UTEP. Again, it's hard to keep all these in mind, right? He had a really good game in week 1. He graded out in the 80s for PFF. And if you just look at the eye test, I think he had like 12 carries for 84 yards. So he played really, really well in week 1. So we have to be conscious of that. Austin Eckler, he is not what he used to be, right? He was played for the Chargers for a long time. They use him a lot out of the backfield. He gets a lot of touches. I think he got 35 plays in this last game. I think the Packers are going to go into this game thinking, hey, if we limit their passing attack, we can stop their run game. So I do think the Commanders on the flip side are going to say, yeah, we want to run the ball. We had 220 yards last week. I think we can run on the Packers. So I do think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that plays out. I think the Packers can and will shut down their running game. I don't know if we're going to see another, 46-yard rushing game for the opponent for the Packers. They obviously dominated the Lions last week, but if you can keep the Commanders under 100 yards in this game, less than 3 yards per carry, I think you win pretty easily there. As far as mismatches in the Packers' favor, Josh Connerly and that Commanders' offensive line are a weak point, right? Minus Laramie Tunsil, who had a good week in week 1. I think the Packers have potential, especially if they play like they did last week, to dominate the Commanders up front. Now, does that mean they can contain Jayden Daniels? No, it doesn't. That's obviously the challenge, but I do think that, that's a big mismatch in the Packers' favor. Number 2, the Packers wide receivers against the Commanders' secondary. I mentioned it earlier. The safeties are solid. They played a good game last week, but Will Harris specifically, but their corners played bad against the Giants. And the Giants' receiving attack isn't even half as good as the Packers, despite having Malik Neighbors. Again, they have one. Malik Neighbors is better than any of the Packers receivers. I'll give you that. But none of the other Giants receivers are even half as good as the Packers' other receivers. So it's like, do I have a lot of concern there? I really don't. So we'll see how this goes. But I think the Packers receivers are going to have a big game in this one. So mark my words on that. Mismatch number 3. The Packers offensive line against the Commanders pass rush. I don't think the Commanders are going to be able to get pressure on Jordan unless they do sim pressures. I like the guys in the interior from a run stopping standpoint, but from a pass rushing standpoint, again, this is not a good unit. The 19 pressures we saw last week, it was a mirage. It was much more about how bad the Giants offensive line is. I think Jordan's going to have time to throw in this one. I think as long as he makes good decisions, he doesn't turn the ball over. The only way the Commanders are going to be able to get pressure on him is if they dial up some blitzes. And if they even do half as good as they did last week against picking up blitzes, I think that Jordan's going to dominate this secondary. Final prediction. I think the Packers come away with a win in this one. The Commanders had a really good run at the end of last season. Jayden Daniels, I think, can be the best quarterback in the league. His ceiling, guys, is bigger than anybody else in the league. Now, does he reach that in year 2? Absolutely not. But I think in 5 years, as we see Josh Allen age, Pat Mahomes age, which, sorry guys, hot take, Pat Mahomes is not the best quarterback in the NFL. In fact, I don't even think he's number 3 or 4. Hot take. I think Jayden Daniels is that good, right? But the team around him is not ready to compete for a Super Bowl this season, in my opinion. They made some improvements last season, or this offseason, but they're not good enough. If you get Washington out of their game script, make Jayden Daniels throw it 35, 40 times. Make sure he doesn't beat you with his legs. Stop Terry McLaurin. Packers have a massive advantage. Micah and the boys are going to tee off at that point and control the game. Again, if they can't run the ball and they're forced to throw the whole game and the Packers get ahead early, they can pin their ears back and just run like crazy or rush like crazy. I think that's going to be the key here. I do think that's going to happen. There's a few ways this game can go, right? The Packers can win big. They can win close, or Washington can win in a shootout. There's no way that it flips where the Packers get dominated in this one. If they do, boy, I will not be happy recording this on the weekend. I just don't see another path forward for them getting a win in this one, other than, again, winning in a close game. I think the other outcomes are much more likely. Jayden Daniels is probably the best player on the field, so if he plays really, really well, if he takes over this game like we've seen quarterbacks do in the past, I do think the Commanders can win this game. If the Packers turn the ball over a ton, the Commanders can win this game if the Commanders protect the ball. If the Packers show up flat and get off to a bad start, turnover on the kickoff comes to mind. Penalties, right? If the Packers beat themselves in this one, the Commanders are going to be in it. But again, I don't think we're going to see that version of the Packers much this season. Ultimately, final prediction, the Packers are going to win 31-23. I will see you guys after the game this weekend. Follow me on Twitter at TitletownTalkPC. Give me a 5-star review if you're so inclined. Download the podcast so I know who's listening. Send me your questions. Follow the podcast on YouTube. That helps. I'm trying to build up the YouTube channel soon. I really appreciate you guys listening. Thanks for bearing with me on low energy this morning. Hopefully this was helpful. And I will see you guys on the weekend to recap a hopeful Packers win. Thank you for listening. Go Pack, go.